Evil is present all throughout the world and all throughout history, from Sodom and Gomorrah to the Salem witch trials to the Holocaust to the upheaval and shootings. This has become a primary cause for doubt and struggle in the modern Christian church. How could a loving and good God allow such evil to harm such good people? Why didn't God just create a sinless and evil-free world? Evil is defined as an immoral or wicked deed, or result characterized or accompanied by misfortune or suffering. Despite this causing doubt, evil and suffering is actually evidence that a loving God exists. For instance, if God had created no world, then there would be no evil. But is no world better than an evil one? Similarly, God could have easily created a world with no evil and not given humanity the free will to choose our actions. But that would not end up in a love towards God, but rather hate towards a controlling ruler, or a world full of robots and no true loving relationships with God. Evil helps us to see the morality in God and in the world, to better our complex understanding of God and His purposes and will. Another often looked at solution to the issue of evil is that God could take away all people who have the potential to sin and cause harm, suffering, and evil. That has one very obvious issue. There would be nothing left. Evil is the opposite of good, and both must be present to see God's true love and nature, and to give us as humans the ability to love God and come to know Him fully. However, as Christians, we must avoid all evil at all odds and look to follow God with our entire being. Romans 12:17-18 says, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." God commands us to avoid the unavoidable evil and live according to His will and show His love to all this inherently evil world. James 1:13 says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and He Himself tempts no one. But each one is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desires. Then, when desires conceive, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is full grown, it gives birth to death." Sin and suffering through evil is not of God's causation, but rather man's own desires and nature. Recently, there's been an increase in school shootings. And while people tend to falsely blame guns and politicians, they also blame God for these attacks and use them as evidences against God's presence. However, these attacks are results of the evil intents of man and results of people directly acting out against the God of the Bible. Another huge misconception in the Christian faith is that God will not love you if you commit major acts of evil. Earlier this year, one of my atheist friends was learning about God, but had some major sins that he did not think God would forgive him for. While I did not personally know his sins, he told me that they were worse than I could ever think him possible of committing. So I read to him 2 Corinthians 5:17, which says that Christ, the old person in us, is gone and there is a new creation in Christ. I explained to him that no sin is too much for Christ and that God would forgive him. He quickly became a follower of Christ and is now becoming an active and strong member in the Christian church. Evil is not God's doing, but rather man's corruption of God's given goodness. He then allows it in our world to help us better understand Him and His presence in our lives. We must use the evils of this world to better this world's understanding of God.